Welcome back to Mornings with Ojanimi. This is a space where we don't just rush into the day, but then we invite God into our thoughts, our choices, and our directions. And today, we're still going to be talking about living with intention. In fact, throughout this month, the month of January, I'm going to be speaking about living with intention. Now, not just intentional living according to culture, but intentional living according to God's design. In Ephesians chapter 5, verse 15 to 16, it says, "Be very careful then how you live, not as unwise, but as wise, making the most of every opportunity." And we see that God is so intentional. His creation, that 7 days of creation, was so intentional. Therefore, your life has to be intentional if it's ever going to make sense in the bigger picture. And today we reflect on how intentionality shows up in 3 aspects of our lives. And I'm going to be saying some things that we might not necessarily agree with immediately. Now, what I would even want to agree with what I'm saying is your conscience. Okay, it might not make sense to you logically, but then your conscience will agree that this is what it really is, and then with time you get to adjust. So the 3 aspects we're going to be looking at is your work, your environment, and then your relationship. So we are going to speak about how intentionality shows up in these 3 aspects: our work, our environment, and our relationship. So let's look at our work. From a biblical perspective now, work wasn't designed as a cause, and that's one of the misconceptions we have, especially as Christians. God did not put Adam to work or to till the hard ground. Initially, that's when he put him in the Garden of Eden. In fact, what work is, that's when we see Genesis chapter 2 and verse 15, is that God placed man there to walk the garden and then take care of it. If you read same there in Genesis, that's at a point in creation, even after God had created the plants and everything, it was written that on the surface of the earth there wasn't any vegetation. And there were 2 reasons there. God had not sent rain on the earth, and then also there was no man to walk the ground. So this is something I want you to live with today in this podcast. Work is what makes the world work. Yes, work is not necessarily what you are paid for, but work, I know we say money is what makes the world work and money is what makes the world go round. No, but primarily work, every aspect of everyone's contribution to the world is what makes the world work. And for your life to begin to work, you need to begin to work. For the people around you and for things to begin to work, you need to work. You don't necessarily have to be employed to work. So primarily, work is stewardship, work is service, and work is partnership with God. Why do I say it's partnership with God? Remember, I mentioned that in Genesis, quickly, let me just go back to my Bible. In Genesis chapter 2 and verse 5, and it says, "And every plant of the field before it was in the earth, and every herb of the field before it grew." Okay, let me start from verse 4. So Genesis chapter 2 and verse 4. "These are the generations of the heavens and of the earth when they were created in the day that the Lord God made the earth and the heavens. And every plant of the field before it was in the earth, and every herb of the field before it grew. For the Lord God had not caused it to rain upon the earth." That's the first condition. "And there was not a man to till the ground." So it wasn't a cause. Okay? It wasn't a cause. Work primarily is partnership with God. In Colossians chapter 3, And verse 23, it reminds us to walk as unto the Lord. And last week, while I was meditating on these things, God began to speak to me, and He said something that even when you are paid for a job, still do it as unto the Lord. Why? So this is one of the reasons why you must understand it. True, you were paid for that service or that product, and you are supposed to be delivering based on how you've been paid. But intrinsically, right? Intrinsically, what actually happens is God has deposited that gift in you, and you need to be accountable for it. So your accountability is not based on how much you were paid. Your accountability is based on the fact that you deploy that talent He has given you to its maximum potential. Because if we continue to work based on how we are paid, especially in an economy that continually seeks to want to underpay you or even underemploy you, you would see that you would just be shortchanging your life. You would just be shortchanging your life. So, living with intention means asking, what is God teaching me here? Is this season preparing me for something greater? Am I honoring God with excellence and integrity? So these questions we must ask ourselves as regarding the work God has committed into our hands. And I would beg to say that work is not employment. I get a lot of reviews on this podcast, and I ask, okay, what's up? What are you doing? And I get replies of, okay, I haven't been employed yet. I don't have any work I'm doing yet. I'm just training. What do you mean by that? So understand what work is. Work is first, primarily, what makes the world around you work. I was watching a YouTube video, and then I saw this man. He happened to be a clown, and then hundreds of people were gathered around him, and he was just making people happy. I mean, he was a street clown, and I was like, man, this guy is working. He's fulfilling purpose. Nobody necessarily employed him in that park or that garden, but he's fulfilling purpose. He's making the world happier. People are going to live with the memories of what he was doing at that point. True, nobody was going to pay him. I'm sure he just had his bag on the ground, and then some people just get to drop pennies and all that. But primarily is the fact that he was fulfilling purpose in that which he was doing, and he was intentional about deploying the gift that God had put in him. Secondly, let's understand what environment is and how we can be intentional about it. One of the things you must notice, environment is deeply spiritual. 1 Corinthians chapter 15 and verse 33 tells us that bad company corrupts good manners. Your environment affects and influences how you pray, how you believe, and even how you hear from God. You know, there are these times where you get to a house or a shopping mall or just an environment, and then the network on your phone drops. You are not even able to upload things of kilobytes like pictures or even like word files. That's what environment is. So God often changes people by first changing their environment. Ask yourself, does this environment draw me closer to God? Does it nurture faith or fuel fear in me? Does it support obedience or compromise? These things you must ask yourself. And I'm not necessarily big on changing of environment in terms of changing geographically. No, I am a big proponent of creating your environment. Create your environment. Create a deep spiritual environment. Create a productive environment. How do you create this environment, the deep spiritual environment? One of those ways is you commit to praying in your environment. That's one of the first things. You soak your environment in prayer, in worship. Anybody who is around me will know that when I wake up in the morning, one of the first things that is coming out from my phone is either my audio Bible, or I'm listening to a worship song or a set list of worship songs. Not necessarily even because I want to score them as a musician. I am just soaking my environment. Same thing when my studio is idle. That's idle now in terms of not having to do active work. What you just be hearing in the background is either a worship song or just something to marinate the environment spiritually. So you intentionally create that environment and then invest in your environment. Yes, that 1,000, that 2,000 naira, that $5, that $10 you have, use it to get a frame. Use it to rework your paintings. It mustn't be a drastic change. In fact, this week you can decide to do things. And there was this discussion I was having with my elder brother, and it just came back to me to mention. And I said, one of the first ways to work on your environment is to keep it extremely clean and organized. It might not be expensive, but one of the first ways, permit my words now, to pimp your environment is to keep it extremely clean and extremely organized. Sorry, I'm having to use the word extreme because that's what I do. But it helps the mind, it helps everything around you. Okay, and then finally, as we wrap up with this podcast, we are going to be looking at understanding your relationship, being intentional about your relationship. One thing I came to realize is that the matters of relationship really matters to God. Truly. When he said, Jesus was speaking now, and he said, when you get to the temple and want to give a gift to God, and you find out that your brother has aught against you, so not you now having the fault against him, you know that you offended somebody, leave your gift there and go and settle with the person. That's how God is intentional. I was reading through the whole book of Exodus, I think a few weeks back, last 2 weeks, and what just kept brewing in my mind is the fact that's when I see all those civil laws that God was coming up with, or not coming up with now, but gave Moses, is the fact that God is really intentional about how we relate with our human beings, the honor we give them, the respect we give them, not wanting to see them in hurt. So God is very intentional about relationship. Jesus was intentional about relationship. Not everybody had the same level of access. That's another aspect. In Proverbs chapter 13 and verse 20, it says, those who walk with the wise would be wise. Living with intention means understanding boundaries, alignment, and purpose in a relationship. Some relationships sharpen you, others distract you. Wisdom is knowing the difference. This week, when you go through the week, ask, is this relationship sharpening me? Is this relationship draining me? Is this relationship distracting me? Ask yourself these questions. Now, it's not for you to go all out and then begin to break relationships up and down. No. But you must know the level of access you give. Jesus didn't carry the 5,000 to the mountain to pray with him. There are some people who are not supposed to be giving you advice. Yeah, this might sound harsh. There are some people that you are not supposed to be speaking with in terms of matters that relates to destiny and life and death. Yes, this is being intentional about your relationship. You don't need to break them, but then know and establish boundaries. Know and establish boundaries. Which of them are here to teach me a lesson? Which of them are here for just a moment? Which of them are here in my life for a purpose? Which of them are here in my life for life? Ask these questions as you go out this morning and then begin to make adjustments. God is a God of purpose, not confusion. Your work matters, your environment matters, and then your relationship matters. Choose alignment over convenience. Choose purpose over pressure. Thank you for spending time with me on Mornings with Ojonemi. May your steps be ordered, your heart guarded, and your life lived with divine intention. See you next week. God bless you.